Let's speak further about mass killings in the Western Cape and gang violence. We're joined now by Reclaim the City leader, Nkosikhona Swaartbooi. Nkosikhona, welcome to the SABC. Good to have your time this evening. So we were just hearing there from the spokesperson for the police saying they're expecting, in fact, things to get much worse in the Overcome Heights area. What are you hearing in terms of the situation there as it relates to gang violence? How bad is it already?
Thank you very much for having me, and good afternoon to your listeners. I mean, policing is one of the issues that any society cannot function without. But I want us here to deal with the issues that really affect communities and not dealing with the impact of those things. Policing is a vital function into our society, but it needs to be balanced and strategic. Because what we're currently seeing now in terms of how crime is dealt with is that there's an over-policing of poor and working class communities. And that further exacerbates, tensions within communities and distrust. It is not a shock that no one in that community wants to engage with the police in terms of what has happened. And you can never police away poverty, restlessness of young people, unemployment, and because these are socioeconomic issues that actually fuel, the crime that we are seeing in places like Cape Town. Things like youth unemployment in South Africa, it has risen. We've recently heard of that. And creating economic restlessness and increasing the risk of engagement in criminal activities. So we need to try to find ways to deal with socioeconomic issues that actually drive young people in particular to be involved in crime, as opposed to displacing crime. Because what we're currently seeing in Cape Town is that now that there's a mass shooting in Muizenberg, there's going to be more law enforcement officers that are sent to Muizenberg. And that means that we are displacing crime in Muizenberg. And tomorrow or the week after, we'll hear about more shootings in Mthatha, more shootings in other areas, because crime is not being dealt with in a manner that actually roots it out, its roots. But we are further displacing it and responsive and reactive in terms of how we react as a country, as a government, into these criminal elements that we're seeing in our communities.
So the challenge with that, Nkosikhona, and I hear you on the socio-economic factors that come into play here. We know that's been covered even when you look at young people, young men in particular, teenagers even being recruited, children, to join gangs, because often the gangsters are seen as the only people who are living comfortably because they're making money from crime. But to deal with the socio-economic issues would require a response from a different wing, a different section of the government, right? Because police would have to act on the criminality. Where are the other wings of the government, and why have they not responded sufficiently to the socio-economic factors which you've just outlined?
Correct. I mean, we've even had in Khayelitsha, the Khayelitsha Commission of Inquiry, which actually spoke to length about the breakdown of relations between communities and the police ministry as an institution. And what this has done is that there were recommendations that were given in terms of how different governments from different spheres of government could actually work together. Because crime in Cape Town is a systemic challenge, not just a policing failure. And effective crime reduction requires holistic interventions. By that, I mean improving socioeconomic conditions, strengthening institutions, and reforming policing as policing institutions, and investigating, what leads young people to be in gangs and in crime. Because in Cape Town, most of the gang members are 15-year-olds, 12-year-olds, and 13-year-olds. Those are the gangs that we are seeing that are shooting guns in our communities. Until these underlying issues are addressed, tragedies like the Muizenberg one will continue to occur, because we are reactive in policing and cannot have only the police only responsive to these things. There needs to be a way of bringing in communities in terms of how we also play our role as community members, as activists, in rooting out crime in our communities, because it has gone out of hand now. It's uncontrollable.
If the children are being recruited into gangsterism from as young as 12, and just based yesterday on the release of the latest unemployment figures or employment numbers by Stats South Africa, they've gone up, the unemployment figures. That then means that the warfare in the Cape Flats and other parts of Cape Town is far from over.
That's correct. I mean, the focus now, should be on strategic policing. informed by data and intelligence rather than random or purely reactive deployments. We must invest in systemic solutions, economic development, job creations, and safe urban planning. We must strengthen youth engagement through sports, arts, and culture, but not just that only. That coupled with programs that are actively running in our communities, because we lack that in our communities. We need to also look into cleaning up policing institutions and rebuilding trust with communities. Because if you go and report any crime, it's more likely that you will die. You'll be the next victim. And no one wants to see that in their family members. We must enhance crime intelligence capabilities to preempt and disrupt criminal networks that we've had now that have also infiltrated, policing institutions, as General Nkosikhona alleged.
So, when you look at the breakdown, the analysis of the crime in the Western Cape, a lot of it is being committed through the use of guns that are acquired illegally, right? A piece in the Daily Maverick published not too long ago, in fact, said that between January and March of this year, 57 dockets related to the killing of multiple murders, let me phrase it in that way, found that 123 people had been killed in relation to just 57 dockets. So more than one person killed in many of those instances, right? Where are these guns coming from?
Most of these guns, I can tell you for a fact that these are guns that are confiscated, that continue to be confiscated in communities. But because the crime intelligence units or, the policing institutions are not one that are now trustable or have good policing systems to ensure that no one within those systems can actually work with criminals. If you go and report a crime now in Cape Town, you will be targeted. We've seen, policing forum members being targeted and being killed, and nothing being done enough to ensure that they are kept safe, as opposed to just responding to crime. Because this will not stop up until we clean the corruption that is within these institutions. And that requires an investment into those institutions. In the city of Cape Town, in 2019, the city of Cape Town, invested about more than $1 billion in its law enforcement agency program. But what we've seen with that is nothing in stopping crime. But what it does, it displaces crime, moving crime from Khayelitsha, from Nyanga, and now to see crime, the same crimes and the same perpetrators in places like Mthatha, the Eastern Cape, Polokwane, and all of these rural areas. The other question we should be asking is what has given the rise of these violent crimes, of violent gun crimes committed through guns in rural areas? Where do those guns come from? Because we know we can trace them to the case of Brigadier Prinsloo, who took these guns that were confiscated and flooded them into our communities. So we need to re-strengthen the law enforcement institutions. We need to invest more money in terms of strengthening crime intelligence institutions to ensure that crime is investigated and cases are followed through to ensure that perpetrators are brought to the books. However, we must also look into how police resources are allocated.
What do you mean by that, briefly?
The manner in which police resources are allocated is one that mimics the apartheid or reminiscent of the apartheid system. When a police officer works in Khayelitsha, in Alexandra, in Soweto, does a good job, they get a promotion, and guess where they are sent? They are sent to Sea Point, Kemp's Way, to all of these affluent areas where crime is not. And by police resources, we're not only referring to guns. We need skilled officers. We need computers for these police officers, because in places like Khayelitsha, you'll have one detective with more than 1,000 cases that they have. And if you look at the population of the areas where they are doing their policing work, you'll find that each police officer, in terms of the ratios, has a huge volume of people that they have to police for. And this requires a change in legislation and political willingness from the political leaders to ensure that resources are brought to where crime is and not where crime is not.
Nkosikhona, good to talk to you. Nkosikhona Swaartbooi is leader of Reclaim the City, speaking to us about the escalating levels of gangsterism and gang violence in the Western Cape.